Helo, a chroeso cynnes i chi gyd i Fctv. Fenw I ydy Owain Rowlands a dwi'n gweithio ar y prosiect EAP yng Nghymru gyda cyswllt ffermio. Yn ystod y rhaglen hon, byddwn nhw'n dal fyny gyda rhai o'r ffermwyr sy'n cymryd rhan mewn prosiectau EAP a clywed sut maent yn treialu syniadau arloesol a helpu gyda rhai o'r sialensiau maent yn hwynebu. Yn gyntaf, bydd newid hinsawdd ac allyriadau carbon dioxide yn cael ein sylw. Maent bellach wedi dod yn rhai o'r brif bynciau wrth drafod dyfodol y tirlun amaethyddol. Mae Llywodraeth Prydain wedi gosod targed o gyrraedd net zero o ran allyriadau tŷ gwydr erbyn 2050. Ond ar hyn o bryd, ychydig iawn o ddealltwriaeth sydd yna o beth yn union mae hyn yn golygu i ffermydd ar draws Cymru. Mae Hugh Martineau yn un o 6 ffermwr yn ardal Aberhonddu sy'n ceisio cynyddu ei dealltwriaeth o'r gylchred carbon ar ei ffermydd.
Hello, my name is Hugh Martineau. We're standing in the field here at Treberfydd Farm by Langos Lake. The farm here is 250 acres. We took on the farm about 5 years ago now, and we're slowly establishing the farm enterprise. We've got some Romney sheep now, and we're looking to expand it into some cattle in the near future. We're looking to try and do something which integrates appropriate environmental management with productive farming.
Could you give us a brief overview of the project and where the initial idea came from?
The project here is looking at carbon neutral farming, or how to get to a net zero position within agricultural production systems, and I'm working closely with 6 other farmers in the area. So we've got a farm over the other side of the lake and the other side of the ridge, and then there's a couple more around the area that we're working closely with. We collectively discussed the challenges around greenhouse gas emissions and the sort of net zero goals that are being set within the industry and by our customers as farmers as well. So we wanted to know the feasibility of getting to a carbon neutral or a net zero position.
And can you tell us what work has been undertaken so far on the project?
Yeah, so the project's been split into 3 work packages, if you like. So the first of those was actually doing the greenhouse gas emissions assessment. So we've looked at all of the enterprises within the project group, and we have been looking at the greenhouse gas emissions from each of those systems. So the enteric fermentation emissions from livestock, the nitrous oxide emissions from the use of nitrogen on the farms, and then other things like energy use as well. So Bangor University have been leading that element of the work and have produced the results so far from so effectively giving us a baseline position on our emissions. The other component of work which is now completed was the soil sampling and analysis for carbon stocks. So across each of the 6 farms there's been quite an intensive amount of soil sampling activity, and we've now got a soil carbon stock baseline from which we can understand what the potential for future sequestration into soils looks like. The third element of the work, which we're going to be talking a bit about today, is looking at hedgerows and the role of woody biomass on the farm. So we're going to do assessment of trees and hedges in terms of the carbon stock that they have and hold on the farms, but also we're hoping to fill a bit of a gap in the understanding of hedges in terms of actually understanding the carbon stock changes and sequestration capability of the hedges. So we've got Eric here from Forest Research today, and what he's doing is using LiDAR technology to effectively assess the biomass density of the hedges at different ages. So what I've done over the course of the last 3 or 4 years is left hedges to grow and cut certain bits of them, so I can understand from the assessment that Eric's going to do is how much biomass is accumulated from one year to the next based on different cutting regimes, which will hopefully help us understand how to manage his hedges in the future for not only biodiversity but also enhancing the sequestration.
And there's a lot of interest currently on carbon storage within the soil, isn't there? Was the results over the 6 farms what you were expecting it to be, or did it differ a lot between farms or even between fields?
Well, a lot of us are on a similar type of soil series, so we're on sort of red sandstone bedrock and quite high sand components. So actually the carbon storage capability is slightly limited by that in some ways. So in clay soils you can actually store significantly more carbon than you can in sandier soils. But we were still hitting a sort of 5–6% organic matter on our permanent grassland, so we're really pleased with that. And that's replicated across the group.
You mentioned that Bangor University are part of the project and they were doing the carbon calculations across the farms. What sort of parameters were they looking into?
Yeah, so Bangor have been great. It's been really good working with them. So they collected a lot of data about each of the farms within the project group. So effectively what they were looking at is the production system on the farms. They were looking at numbers of livestock, looking at fertiliser used and purchased, what's been brought onto the farm, because the embedded emissions associated with those elements are also included within the greenhouse gas emissions assessment. And then they're looking at the output, so how much has been generated by each of the farms, because when we're looking at the emissions intensity calculations, we're effectively dividing the emissions occurring on the farm by the output. So efficiency is a really important component of greenhouse gas emissions reductions.
And then from looking at your own farm, where do you see the biggest potential of either increasing your carbon storage or reducing your greenhouse emissions?
Well, we're in a slightly interesting position because we're scaling up the operation at the moment in terms of increasing livestock numbers. So our emissions look pretty awful actually in the first few years as we're building up the stock numbers, because actually our production is low. When we get to a sort of steady state of production, then at that stage we will be looking for every efficiency we can find. So it's really all about how we use the resources on farm as efficiently as possible to generate as much output as possible. So we'll be looking at how do we use legumes, how do we generate as much from within the system as we can using the resources at our disposal. So try and reduce any feed purchases onto the farm, try and make best use of any muck that's being used, and then also thinking about the use of legumes and herbal rich lays and things like that will make a big difference. Not just in terms of the emissions from the use of inputs, but also actually in terms of the sequestration, sort of maintaining permanent grass, making sure that we're looking after the carbon stock that's there, and wherever possible enhancing carbon stocks within soils as well.
And there's a lot of interest currently within farming about the financial opportunities with carbon credits. What effect could this have on the target to reach net zero?
It's a really topical area, and it's actually, from a farmer's perspective, a little bit difficult to know what to do about the opportunity from carbon credits, because people are offering sums of money to purchase the carbon credits that are generated within the farm system. My particular view is that we need to make sure that we as farms, our individual enterprises, are as close to net zero and moving into sort of a net positive area before we really trade our carbon out with the system, because otherwise we're potentially giving our carbon credit away to other industries when we really need to keep it within agriculture. It's a big enough challenge on its own, making agriculture net zero without trading our carbon out with that.
And it seems the market at the minute is for kind of new additions to carbon storage, so planting new trees or new hedgerows. Could work such as what Eric is doing, measuring the carbon storage within existing hedgerows, could that be used to add to that market? So it's also looking at existing infrastructure, existing green infrastructure on the farm?
The work that Eric's doing here will enhance our understanding of what hedgerows are providing us in terms of sequestration potential. That's really important because at the moment our calculations, a lot of them just assume that hedgerows are in an equilibrium position. They're effectively emitting as much greenhouse gas or carbon through the annual cutting as they are sequestering. I like to think of it in the terms of what's the fate of the carbon that has been removed. If we're effectively cutting it and letting it respire back into the atmosphere, then we're losing everything that we gain within that cycle of production. So if we can figure out ways of actually retaining the carbon as much as possible, then that's going to be beneficial. And that's why we are looking at ways of removing woody biomass in a sustainable way, and then through hedge laying, which is an active management of the hedge. And then we are looking to hold on to the carbon which has been harvested. So we've chipped a lot of the wood, we're using it as livestock bedding, and then we will return it back to the soil. Rather than, in some instances, it might get burnt, which is effectively just releasing all of the carbon which has been sequestered back into the atmosphere, and there's no net gain in that situation.
And there's another year left on the project, Hugh. What are the next steps?
So the next steps are specifically on the hedge work that we're doing today, there'll be another measurement that's taken in a year's time, or maybe just under a year's time, which will pick up another sort of year's worth of growth within the hedge, and that will be measured. And then ultimately what we're looking for is to bring together the different components of the project. So the measurement of the carbon stocks within hedges, the measurement of carbon stocks within soils, the potential stock changes, which will give us that overall sequestration capability. And then that will be used alongside the greenhouse gas emissions assessment that Bangor have done. So it will effectively allow us to understand our net zero position and allow us to understand what we can then do in order to push towards a net zero goal.
Birch trees are our third most common tree species in Wales, where they provide habitat for biodiversity, shelter for livestock, as well as firewood. But now we have another use to add to that list, and that's in the form of birch syrup.
Croeso I goedwig Llyn Parc Mawr, un o safleoedd prosiect EIP Cymru sy'n edrych ar dechnegau o gadw nodd bedw ffres ar y safle yn barod i'w brosesu. Dewch efo fi I gwrdd â rhai o'r criw sydd bod yn rhan o'r prosiect ac I weld y nodd bedw yn dyferu allan o foncyffion coed bedw. Mae'n ddipyn o ryfeddod.
I'm Brian Dickinson from Wild Resources, and we've been looking at non-wood forest products, which is all the products that come from forests which are not timber. And one of the products we started looking at was birch sap and turning it into birch syrup.
So what issue or problem have you been trying to solve with this project, Brian?
Well, we knew that we can get birch sap from the trees, but the biggest issue is when it comes out of the tree, the sap is very, very dilute. It's normally just 1% sugar, and we need to eventually end up with about 67% sugar. The issue is how to reduce that volume of very dilute sap into something more concentrated in the most efficient way, economically the best way as well.
And who's involved in the project altogether with Llyn Parc Mawr?
We've got 3 or 4 sites across Wales, a mixture of woodland owners and farmers. We've got one farm in Glenamon, another one in Abergvenny. We've got a private woodland close to Merthyr Mawr near Bridgend. And also, of course, Llyn Parc Mawr here, or Newbury in fact.
We're coming towards the end of the tapping season. It's March the 28th, so 2022, and it does differ from year to year, isn't it? So what type of a year has it been this year?
The volumes we've been getting this year have definitely been lower than previous years. And the season seemed to have been a little bit shorter. The reasons for that we're not quite sure about. It's been a relatively mild winter, and it's also been really, really warm in the last 2 weeks here, and very, very dry. So it's probably a combination of all those factors, I think.
So you've been looking at these different preservation techniques of the sap. So what type of techniques have you been looking at?
Yeah, we've been looking at sort of 3 pre-processing techniques where we can concentrate the sap. The first one is just heating it up in a large catering urn, just boiling it up and reducing the volume that way. We've also been looking at boiling the sap over a wood fuel fire with big evaporating pans. And we've also been looking at a system called reverse osmosis, where we send the sap through a series of very, very fine filters, and it separates the pure water and the more concentrated sap in different directions, and that's proving very useful.
And although the project's not quite finished, Brian, and that's one of the project specialists, what conclusions are you making already as we've got the second season under our belt?
Well, as you say, we're still looking at the data we've got. This is the second season we've been tapping. We're finding that each group is finding the different processing systems more or less useful, but the one that seems to be coming out, all the groups seem to really be really pleased with, is the reverse osmosis. So maybe a combination of that and one of the other processing systems is what we'll end up with. Birch tapping season, the sap only flows for maybe 2 or 3 weeks every year, and it's usually in March. It usually starts very early in March, and the trees will carry on producing sap for maybe 10 days or sometimes a little bit longer. It varies an awful lot between trees how much sap is produced. Normally, on average, it's around about 2 litres per day. But some trees can give more than 6 litres a day. Some trees, for reasons we don't really understand, only give about a half litre or a litre. So I think it's possibly due to the genetics of the tree, and also possibly down to the drainage around the tree and where the roots are, and all sorts of different factors like that. The trees need to be healthy. It's not good to tap any trees which have got any rot showing or dead branches above. And they've also got to be a certain size. They've got to be at least 20 centimetres diameter at 1.3 metres. And this is the mark here that's showing 1.3 metres. So it's got to be reasonably big and a healthy tree. Once we've selected the tree, we need to find a spot where we actually drill the hole, and we usually give that a really good clean. We use a little bit of alcohol to clean the bark, once we've decided the spot, we can use a drill. And what we use is a 8mm drill, and we don't drill any deeper than 4 centimetres maximum. So we mark that on the drill, and we wouldn't go any deeper than that. And then when we come to drill the tree, we would drill slightly pointing upwards, so that any sap naturally flows out with gravity and goes out through the tube into the bottle. Okay, so once we've drilled the hole, we'll give it a good spray and clean out any sawdust and frass that's in the hole, and make sure it's all very clean and hygienic. And then the next step is to actually put a plastic spile in to collect the sap. And again, you can buy these specifically for birch tapping of the right size. And you put those very carefully in the hole. You wouldn't tap it in too hard, otherwise you'll split the bark, just so it's firm. And then we'll attach what we're using is 5 litre water bottles, all very clean again. Attach that to the tree, make sure it's all fixed safely, and the sap will naturally drip out through the tree into the tube, into the bottle, and it'll all be nice and sterile. At the end of the season, when either the tree has finished producing sap, or the sap, because of the environmental conditions, has gone very milky and cloudy and we're not collecting it anymore, at the end of the season we take the spile out, and normally we just leave the hole. We don't put anything in it to block up the hole. In the past it used to be recommended that you put a wooden dowel in, but we just leave the hole as it is, and a healthy tree naturally will just heal the hole itself. Okay, so this is one of the processes that we've been trialling, which is reverse osmosis, RO. And it's just a way of concentrating the very, very dilute sap that comes out of the birch trees, and taking some of the water and discarding that, and so we end up with a more concentrated sugar solution, which can then be taken on to the final process of turning it into syrup. So what we do, when we gather the sap and get it into the large buckets, we send it through the RO. And the RO is just a system of very, very fine filters, and then that splits the initial sap into two. It sends out pure water in one direction and slightly more concentrated sap in the other direction. And using this, we can double the amount of sugar in the solution very quickly, and we can recycle it and carry on increasing the sugar solution up to a certain point.
Fe wnawn ni droi wan at y byd digidol, lle mae dipyn o ddatblygiad wedi bod yn y blynyddoedd diwethaf gyda rhywbeth o'r enw LoRaWAN. Mae ganddo potensial mawr i wneud i'n haws i gasglu gwahanol ddata ar ffermydd drwy ddefnyddio rhwydwaith o sensors. Mae Geraint Hughes yn gweithio ar 2 brosiect EIP sy'n treialu'r defnydd o LoRaWAN mewn 2 cyd-destun gwahanol.
Mae'r prosiect yn edrych ar ddefnyddio sensoriad ar gyfer gwella diogelwch neu security farm, yn cynnwys 5 o ffermydd, ac ar bob ffarm mae yna sensoriad yn cael ei treialu a'i pilota ran ei ffeithlonrwydd a bydd ymatab y ffermwyr i'r dechnoleg. Cyn gosod y sensoriad, da ni'n mynd trwy sawl lefel o waith. Da ni'n bod yn edrych ar yr farchnad eang drwy'r byd o ran beth yw'r sensoriad sydd ar gael. Wedyn yn prynu fewn y rhan mwyaf ddawol ac yn gwneud arbrofion wedyn edrych pa mor ddibynadwy ydyn nhw, beth yw'r wybodaeth sy'n cael ei roi, a dewis be yn ein barn ni ar arbenigwyr oedd yn gweithio i'r prosiect ydy'r sensoriad gorau ar gyfer gwahanol ddefnydd. Felly ar rhai o'r ffermydd mae gennym ni sensoriad sydd yn tracio symudiad offer. Mae gennym ni sensor wedi guddio dan y ddaear sydd yn gallu hysbysu ffermwyr pryd mae yna gar yn dod dros rhyw lwybr neu lôn i'r fferm. A mae'r sensoriad i gyd yn rhoi stamp amser pryd mae hyn yn digwydd sy'n gallu fod yn handi iawn mewn pryd mae yna dorcyfraith yn digwydd ar fferm. Felly dyna flas o'r prosiect yna. Wedyn yr ail sy'n defnyddio'r sensoriad ydy'r un efo slurry, ac mae yna bwysau cynyddol ar ffermwyr o ran rheolaeth slurry, mae yna ddeddfwriaeth, mae'r diwydiant yn ymwybodol iawn ohono fo. A da ni'n ceisio edrych be ydy gwerth sensoriad o ran darparu gwybodaeth i ffermwr pryd i roi slurry a pryd i beidio rhoi slurry, ac hefyd i greu audit neu cofnod o be di'r amodau pryd mae slurry'n cael ei rhoi ar gaea.
Yn amlwg, da ni'n gwybod beth di lora wan, ond i rywun sydd alla ddim wedi clywed amdano fo o blaen, sut ydych chi'n desgrifio fo?
Wel, acronym di lora wan ar gyfer Long Range Wireless Area Network, felly mae'n rwydwaith sy'n caniatáu i sensoriad gyfathrebu efo'r porth neu'r gateway fel sydd gyda ni ar do adeilad Glyn Llifon fan hyn. Ac beth sy'n arbennig am yr rhwydwaith yma di fod o'n caniatáu cyfathrebu pecynna bach iawn o data dros bellderoedd hir. A rheswm fod y pecynna bach yn bwysig ydy fod o'n ymestyn oes batris yn y sensor. Mae sensor nodweddiadol lora wan yn gallu parhau am 5 mlynedd yn y cae heb orfod newid batris. Felly dyna di'r prif nodweddion y rhwydwaith ydy data bach dros bellderoedd hir, a mae'r gateway yna wedyn wedi gysylltu i'r we sydd yn caniatáu i ffermwyr fel Rhodri fa hyn i gael mynediad drwy'r ffôn neu drwy gyfrifiadur. Efallai un peth pwysig sy'n rhaid ni osgoi di beidio ffocysu ar y lora wan. Lora wan ydy'r rhwydwaith da ni ddefnyddio ar hyn o bryd. Efallai yn y dyfodol fydden ni'n defnyddio 5G, ond mater bach di newid y rhwydwaith. Mae lora wan yn agor y drws bellach i ni wneud y gwaith rhyngrwyd y pethau ar lefel ffarm eang, ond efallai fydd y rhwydwaith fydden ni'n ddefnyddio yn esblygu dros y blynyddoedd. Da ni wrth sefyll wrth ymwneud un o'r safleoedd efo'r sensoriad yma. Rhoi dros olwg i ni beth sy'n mynd ymlaen yn y cae yma efo'r prosiect.
Mae gae 23 acar, un o'r caeau mwyaf sy'r fferm yn Glyn Llifon yma. A wedyn mae dipyn o amrywiaeth o fewn y cae chi. Mae ddarn bach glypach lawr am yr afon y fancw. Wedyn mae gennym ni'r gorsaf dywydd yma wedi'w gosod yn nghanol y cae. A ceblau wedyn yn rhedeg allan ohono fo efo sensor pridd i gael rhyw fath o adlewyrchu beth sy'n mynd ymlaen yng nghanol y cae. Wedyn mae gennym ni'n arall wedyn mewn darn chydig bach, sy'n dweud glyb, ond lle mae glybaniaeth, chydig bach mwy o lybaniaeth yn ngwaelod y cae. A mae gennym ni'n arall wedyn yn cae Mount Pleasant ochr draw.
A fewn y cae mawr mae yna 3 safle wedyn, efo chydig bach o nodweddion wahanol yn y pridd. Wedyn y mesur tymheredd a llithdar a glawiad ac yn y blaen. Di'r ffigurau ti'n gael o'r sensoriad mae rhywbeth tebyg beth sa ti ddisgwyl?
Yndyn, fyswn ni feddwl, da ni'n monitro fo, da ni wedi bod yn teulu piswel ar y cae yma, tra mae'r sensoryddion mewn lle. Da ni yn gweld bod y sensoryddion yn rhoi data sy'n gwneud synwyr. Yn enwedig, yn dod o'r darn mwyaf llaeth o'r cae. Mae hynny'n adlewyrchu be fysych chi ddisgwyl i ryw raddau. Bod yr pridd yn bach oerach yn y gaea, a bod y tymheredd wrach ddim yn cynyddu mor sydyn a mae o'n ganol y cae yn y Gwanwyn. A wedyn wrth gwrs mae'r cae pellach cwn sychach cae na'r cae yma. Mae'n chydig bach o wahanol pridd yna, mae o'n sgafnach chydig bach. Yndi.
A holl bwrpas o'r gwaith da ni wedi bod yn gwneud ydy edrych ar os yna botensial i'r sensoriad mae'n fod o ddefnydd i ffermwyr o ran cymryd cofnod o'r amodau mwyn gwneud penderfyniad o ran lledaenu slurry. Ac wrth gwrs mae yna ddeddfwriaeth yng Nghymru bellach o ran lledaenu slurry yn y broses o gael ei weithredu. Sut wyt ti'n gweld ffordd galla'r dechnoleg yma chwarae rhan wrth i ni drio lleihau'r risg o lygredd dŵr efo slurry?
Yn byr debyg, yr cynnwys lleithder, os di'r cae'n ddwrlawn neu ddim. Hwna yn rhywbeth da ni wedi dysgu llawer iawn dros gaea yma ydy bod y tymheredd y pridd a pa mor llaeth ydy o. Dychmod, da ni'n gwneud rhyw benderfyniad gweledol, dydan. Ond mae'r data yma'n rhoi chydig bach mwy o gadernid i'r wybodaeth pa ddarn o'r cae wrach. O fewn cae wrach bod y darn fwyaf llaeth neu'n anaddas i gymeru slurry, lle wrach yn dop y cae bod o ddigon sych de. Felly, da chi'n neud penderfyniadau mwy cadarn ydych, wedi cael ei selio ar data go iawn. Be dwi'n weld ydy'r sensoryddion yma, mae'n bethau drud ofnadwy. Ond yn fwy na hynny, mae'n siŵr da ni tua milltir o fan hyn o'r coleg ei hun. A mae'r gateway ar ben y coleg sy'n derbyn y data. A fel ydych chi'n gweld, mae'n ei goedwi greit helaeth rhwngth ni a fan o. Mae o wedi dangos bod posib cael data o gau i fewn i'r buarth y ffarm, a'r fferm, neu i ni, i'r coleg ynde. A lawr i'r cyfrifiadur ag ar sgrin.
A da chi'n cael gwybodaeth ar y ffôn smart wedyn sydd. Os da chi'n chwilio amdan y gwybodaeth.
Mae posib gosod alerts ar y bethau fel e. Digwydd bod efo'r un yma, mae o ar sgrin gennau, a mae'n graff eitha eglur o lleithder y pridd, tymheredd yr aer, tymheredd y pridd, a mae hwnna'n wybodaeth pwysig ofnadwy pan mae'n dod i wneud penderfyniad gwasgarus piswel yn ystod misoedd y Gia, enghraifft.
Be di'r sensoriaid sydd yma yn Glyn Llifon efo'r prosiect?
Mae gennym ni sensoriaid ar giatiau yn agor y cae. Da ni wedi bod yn treialu rhai ar cattle grid. A wedyn mae gennym ni rai sensor wan. Mae gennym ni un ar y cubota fan hyn, ar ei dofo, un magnetic GPS, a mae gennym ni un ar y telehandler, peiriant eitha drydfawr sydd yma. Da ni newydd brynu'n ddiweddar. Ac fel ydych chi'n gweld fyny'r sgrin o fancw, mae'n ffens ddiogelwch, felly mae'n ffens perimeter rhithiol, dim un go iawn, felly. Ac os di'r peiriannau yn mynd tu allan i'r ffens yna ar ôl 5 o gloch, mae o'n gyrru alert allan. Da ni'n gallu monitro symudiad hein os oes e raid. Da ni'n gwybod yn union lle maen nhw yn ystod y dydd, ac os da nhw'n symud neu'n static, wrth edrych ar y sgrin, neu mi fedrwch chi setio fo fel bod o'n rhoi alert ar eich ffôn chi, neu ar e-bost, neu text.
A swn i feddwl efo'r alert a'r hysbysiadau mae'r sensoriaid yn ei roed, swn i feddwl sa'ch chi fel ffarmwr, ddim siŵr bod i symudiad bob dim, felly mae rai fod yna rhyw feddalwedd, felly yn digwydd yn cefndir efo chi reoli'r hysbysiadau.
Oes, mae'n feddalwedd, a da chi'n gallu gosod o, os da chi mond isio alert yn ystod awr ginio, neu o 6 y nos tan 6 y bore, neu unrhyw awr o'r dydd. Mi fedrwch chi osod o, fel bod o ddim yn pingio'ch ffôn chi drwy dydd. Chos yn amlwg, ffermwyr bobl brysur o'n adwy, jobsus eraill ar y go. A hefyd, mae yna batrymau lle mae rhai o'ch offer chi yn fwy o risg, does. Os da chi'n mynd i'r sel i werthu, os da chi'n cael cinio yn y tŷ, yn ystod oriau nos, ynde.
Dwi'n meddwl, beth dwi'n dall, mae yna sensor eitha arloesol, fel un o'r ei cynta'r farchnad dwi'n credu, wedi cael ei guddio dan un o'r llwybrau'r coedwig yma yn Glyn Llifon.
Oes.
Sut mae hwnna'n gweithio?
Mae hwnnw rhyw ffordd yn gallu datgan os oes rhywbeth yn pasio. So dwi'n meddwl rhyw ddirgryniad, a dydy am rhaid o fod yn fodi'r trwm mewn chwaith. A mae'n cael ei dyllu fewn wrth ochr y trac. A mae o'n rhyw declyn hir fel un, efo gwifren wedyn yn mynd i fatri i'r data yn ôl i'r prif ffarm neu'r coleg yma yn yr sefyllfa yma. Prosiect
yma, mae Heddlu Gogledd Cymru yn partner prosiect. Mae'n bod yn cyfrannu at y sgyrsiau.
Cyfrannu, ond hefyd yn rhannu hefo ni be ydy'r patrymau pan mae yna bethau yn cael ei dwyn a mae hwnna'n help mawr i ni wedyn edrych am atebion wrach i'r math yna o broblem. A dwi'n meddwl bod yr atebion allan yna, ond bod nhw ddim wedi cael eu cynllunio a'i dyfeisio ar gyfer fferm neu goedwig neu allan yn y glaw. Ar y funud mae lot o'r offers ar gael yn bethau so chi'n gael nhw'n feddal. Dyn nhw'n heavy duty i beth yn isio yn y byd ffarmio. A mi fydd nedeclynau yn dod ar y fei yn flynyddol yn fydd yn fwy addas ar gyfer amaeth coedwigaeth ac emwlad. Ac mae'n gyffroes iawn dwi'n meddwl.
The horticulture sector in Wales is showing a lot of growth at the moment, with plenty of opportunities for growers to sell their high quality produce. Today we're at Mostyn Kitchen Gardens near Holywell, And we're going to meet Philip Handley, who runs the gardens here, and we're also going to meet with Chris Creed, who works for ADAS and is the expert working with us on these projects. Chris, would you like to take us through the trial plots here and explain the different plastics that we're using?
This is a trial of salad leaves under different types of polythene film, and it's got 3 replicates, so all the plots are repeated 3 times to enable us to do statistics on the trial. The first rep has got the tunnels on it. Basically you can see there's a blue covered one, and then 3 that look the same are clear, but they are different types of polythene, and then an untreated control. And what we're looking at here is whether the polythene films actually enhance the weight of crop and also the colour of the crop. So you can see the first plot we're here now is a completely clear polythene, so it doesn't modify the light at all. It just obviously enhances the sun and keeps the rain off. And you can see here how strong the red is. We've got another plot here that's the blue polythene, and the red's nowhere near the same. And it's having an effect on the green and yellow as well, so it's quite an interesting result. The type of polythenes we do have is we've got a conventional clear, which is this one. We've got a diffuse, which is it sort of blurs the light, so the light gets a better spread inside, but it's not quite as strong, so it runs a bit cooler. We've got a blue, which absorbs red-green light, and that is meant to enhance the colour, but on this trial it seems to be not very effective. The red in these plants is anthocyanin, and it's one of these sort of superfoods, so the redder they are the better really, so it's quite interesting. And then we've got an ultraviolet blocker, which most of these polythenes will have an ultraviolet resistor in them, so they don't break down in a year, but this is an ultraviolet blocker that stops the ultraviolet getting onto the crops. It's meant to have an effect on pests like aphids, because it confuses the way they find plants with the colour, and it's also meant to disrupt funguses like mildews and botrytises, so we're taking a note of the disease levels and any aphid, etc., any pest that's on them as well. So it's quite interesting. On the untreated we've had a few birds pecking the plots, and they've not gone for the red, so obviously the red is an inhibitor for you know, some sort of activity, so we're spotting that. So you can see quite clearly that big differences in the colour of the plots, so even though all the films look more or less the same, which is quite an interesting result.
It's extending the season straight away with all the types of plastic. So with these harvestable lettuce, we could have even started a bit earlier, I think, but plainly protecting from damage and on a small scale. It's interesting with the colour, because it's particularly, I think, important. We do quite a lot of our lettuce would be cut and come again, so we'll be mixing bags of lettuce, and we want that lovely dark red. If we're losing that dark red as we are in the next plot, that would certainly be a little bit more of concern. And I do have to say, as a small scale grower, the cost of putting small tunnels in, I think that's an interesting aspect to it as well. I mean, I know these are sort of old-fashioned cloches almost, aren't they? Yeah. But on a small scale, it could add a huge difference to both ends of the season.
So Phil, out of the different crops that you're trialling here, are there any that are showing real promise for Wales?
Yeah, I think that all of the crops that we've got here have got potential, but I think it seems to me, for what we've looked at, there's 2 different markets. We've got people that are producing bags of salad. Now, things like the perilla, which is a bulky leaf and quite herb flavoured, that will mix really well into a general salad leaf mix. Some of the more specialist ones, where you're going to be using much smaller quantities, like the sort of land samphire versions, and these smaller, more delicate plants, are obviously going to be aimed at perhaps chefs that are producing high-end meals. And in Wales, we've always got the problem with people that are more rurally located, whereas you might be able to sell lots of salad bags. You're going to have to be closer to the big conurbations to be able to sell small quantities and actually deliver. So there's a mix of markets, but it's all got great potential.
And that's it for this episode. I hope you've enjoyed visiting the diverse range of projects that we've got running across Wales on our EIP programme. If you'd like to know any more about these projects, or indeed any of the other wider Farm and Connect services, then please take a look at our website or contact your local development officer.